Well, I'm making this. I'm going to freestyle it. I'm going to do the best I can. I figured it's about time that I tell people a little bit of the backstory, a little bit about why I am the way I am, how I got here. It wasn't easy, okay? I'm not going to give you the entire full breakdown. Well, I might. I'll brush on it. This might be really long and I might cut it into a bunch of pieces. We'll see. Well, I grew up in Central Texas, deep in the heart of Texas. There was nothing out there. I mean, nothing out there. Wide open spaces. I rode dirt bikes from a very young age. It was beautiful. I loved everything about it. And when I was like 10 years old, my dad got a really good opportunity to work in Chicago, Illinois. And as much as I didn't want to move and my sister didn't want to move, none of us wanted to move from Texas. He did the best he could, and it was the best thing at that time for us to move to Chicago. It sucked for me. I mean, obviously I had to leave all my friends. I went from a school that was K through 12 all the way to, a school that had more kids in it from K through 6 than my entire school that was K through 12 that I left. And that was huge. It was unbelievable, I grew up with maybe 10 or 12 kids that were in my class. My world was pretty small. I mean, Texas was pretty big, but my little world was small. And when I got to Illinois, I was one of three. There was 3 different classes of third graders that were all the same age. And it was unbelievable how many other kids there were that were my age. So it was like overwhelming in a way. And I'm not going to go too deep into all of that. But anyway, I'll flash forward to I got out of high school and I was signed up for architecture classes. I wanted to be an architect. And I thought, I've always been good at art and I've always been good at drawing and I've always, understood to a degree how to work on things. My dad taught me an awful lot, growing up, how to use tools and things like that. And so I was hell bent on becoming an architect, and opportunity arose in March of 1999, and it was summertime. And it was coming into summer, and I was planning on starting college in the fall of that year. And my dad called me and he said, "Hey, you want to get in the elevator trade?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he was like, "Well, you got nothing to lose. Why don't you get in, and why don't you give it a summer and just and it wasn't ever forced on me. It was always why don't you give it a try and see if you like it, and if you don't like it, well then just bug out and go to college like you want. And so I got into the trades in March of 1999 in the elevator constructors union. I was hired for $14.16 an hour. And now mind you, I am 19 years old, making $14 an hour in 1999. Those of you who are old enough to know that was a significant amount of money for a 19-year-old to be making. I worked that summer all over various places in Illinois, and I had a lot of fun, and I started learning an awful lot, a lot about things I had no idea about. Learning how to build elevators, working with grumpy old men that were in their 50s and 60s that would smoke cigarettes one after another and just never even let the old one go out. I mean, they'd be lighting the next one with the one they just put out. Grumpy ass dudes. They were tough as nails, But I wouldn't trade it for the world. They taught me so much that doesn't get taught these days. That I call it the old man knowledge. Now, sure, some of these old men will teach you things that you probably shouldn't know. They don't really serve a purpose. But a lot of these guys taught me a lot of things, and it helped shape who I am. And so I want to get into standards and systems and precision. And I'm going to use my story to explain why they matter and why they should matter in your life as well. And one observation, I'll start at the end and then I'll go back and I'll explain why. What I've noticed in this culture that we live in now, in the 2020s, is that it seems like we have a breakdown in a standard of ethics, a standard of morals, a sense of pride in doing the best job that you can do. In almost every trade, almost every business out there, the standard has eroded to the point where you have brand new people coming on, being taught how to do this job, but they're being taught by someone who is not even up to the standard. They're not even teaching them the total, true, correct way to do something. And that's because a lot of times some of these people that are doing the teaching are also withholding information because they are protecting their own job. Okay? And so that brings me back. That's a little bit of why this is going on. And I want to go back to starting in the elevator trade. And elevators, if you're not aware, are very, very precise systems. We move humans. So we have safety protocols that are above and beyond most normal construction things. I mean, we're building a functional robot at the end of the day. You take a hunk of steel and you take a motor and you take some electricity and you build this thing that now a layman can walk in off the street and push a button and the elevator will arrive at your floor. It will open the doors automatically for you. It'll allow you to get in. You push a button, the doors close automatically. It safely delivers you to whatever floor and the doors open. I mean, it's a wonder of modern marvel engineering. It's absolutely a great achievement by man to build something like this. And it's also highly, highly precise, a lot more than people think about. And I'm going to use this example, what I learned in the trades when we're stacking rails. Okay, so these elevators, they have two rails that go all the way from the pit all the way to the overhead, one on each side. Okay, and we have to get these rails plumb, in and out, and we also get a front and back. So they have to be perfect from both angles, and they have to be parallel. They can't be like one's in front of the other one like that. They can't be like that. They can't be towed in. They can't be leaning forward or leaning back. They can't be, cattywampus. They have to be perfectly true, like running railroad tracks, but vertical. Well, in the trades, we had a tolerance that we were taught within a 64th of an inch unless otherwise specified. So what we build to is exact. A 64th is very hard to see on a tape measure. On a normal tape measure, a 64th is the difference between being on the line and being light on the line, or being on the line and being heavy on the line. But you're still on the line, but there's a difference. If you really look at a string laid across a tape measure, you can be light on the line or you can be heavy on the line. And that's how precise that we needed to put these rails in. Because something that a lot of people don't think about is if you were off a 16th of an inch, okay, a 16th of an inch on we'll say a 10-foot section. Okay, so every 10 feet, you're going to be off another 16th, another 16th, another 16th. And let's say you're going 100 feet high, a 10-story building, and you're off 10 16ths of an inch. That's 5/8 of an inch, The elevator, if it was off by a 16th of an inch starting out, and you maintain that, you could potentially run the elevator out into the hallway by the time you get, and I'm only talking about a 10-story building, a 100-foot building. Some of these buildings out here are 1,000 feet. Okay, we're talking high-speed elevators that are running 750 feet per minute, 1,000 feet per minute, 1,200 feet per minute. There is no room for error when you're running something that fast to have it, say, sway in and sway out and move around. So the level of precision was not just somebody's standard that they, were being, real anal retentive about. It was absolutely critical that we build this stuff to that level of precision, because if we don't, there's going to be dire consequences. We're going to trash an elevator before we can even get it inspected. So going back to the elevator trade, this is one of the things that I was taught in the elevators, is that it's only right when it's perfect. And you have to insist on absolute perfection. And if it's not, then you have to go back and you have to fix it. You have to make it right. Okay? And we didn't have a choice, because there was no, oh, it's good enough. It was never good enough. Okay? It has to be perfect. Okay? So I spent from the first couple years in the trade just learning how it all went together, learning how to assist my mechanic in anything that he needed, stacking rails. I learned how to tie knots. I learned how to rig. I learned how to use different hoisting techniques. I learned how the electrical systems, the controllers worked. I learned a lot about that on the job. I didn't learn that stuff from books at first. I learned from the man that was standing next to me that was building this elevator, and it was my job to help him in any way possible to get the job done. And I'm so grateful for those guys that I worked with. They taught me 10 times what I learned from books. Books tied it all together. When I got into the apprenticeship program and I started going to nightly classes, and they break it, they start with safety, and you'll do 3, 4, 5 months where you're just talking about safety. How high is a barricade supposed to be? How much force is a barricade supposed to stop you? Because we had unprotected openings on some of these buildings where they're just wide open, and you could just fall in an elevator shaft. So we had to make sure there were barricades, proper approved barricades in place. So we learned about safety. Okay, so that was instilled to me in a very early age, growing up, was that protocols for safety are, number one, if you can remove the hazard, then that is the number one course of action. So a barricade is much better than a fall protection. Fall protection is for when the hazard cannot be removed. Okay, so the first line of defense is, hey, let's build a barricade so that nobody can fall in that hole. Okay, then after you have to violate that barricade to say get on the elevator to move around, for us, then we would wear fall protection and tie off. We would hang safety lines down the hoistway, and we would have our lanyards on rope dogs that we would be able to clip off to and move up and down on our ropes. That way, then, if something ever happened, we were always tied off. But bring me back to the standard. This was instilled in me at a very young age. Right after high school, I started learning about how elevators work, about how adherence to a very, very strict, precise standard really does matter. And I've carried that through my entire life. And being one who has seen every aspect of the trade as far as elevators go, I did new construction in the beginning. I worked on hydraulic elevators. I learned how to cut and groove hydraulic pipe by hand. And then in the beginning, all we were using was wrenches and sockets. We were building elevators by hand. We didn't use power tools hardly at all. We might had a bandsaw, a corded bandsaw to cut metal. We had corded angle grinders to deburr things and to cut metal. We had welders and torches and things like that. And But in the beginning, we didn't have all these fancy tools like everyone has. I was there when Nextels came out. Like, we didn't even have Nextels. I was working with guys that had pagers, and the boss would page us, and then we would have to leave the job site and drive to a payphone to call the boss back to find out what he needed or whatever. That's how far away ago I started in the trades. And I've watched it evolve. I've watched the cell phones come out. I've watched all the new tools and everything. We came out with we had, at first we had these cordless tools, and we were slow to adopt them because, doing the kind of work that we did, we would kill a battery in a half hour and then just be like, well, this is dumb. We need like 100 batteries. So we would still defer back to our corded tools. It was many years later before our tools got to the point where they would actually last long enough that we could get some real good use out of them. We had to go through a couple, 2 or 3 different generations of cordless tools in order for them to finally get there. And I want to say it's probably 2007, 2008. And even then, we had to have lots of batteries to get through a day. I mean, the amount of work that we put those things to. But what I've noticed over all of these years is this degradation in general, this lack of maintenance in our daily lives, lack of maintenance in a standard, not holding a standard, lack of maintenance on your car. Nobody learns how to do anything. Nobody learns how anything works. I met a guy the other day that was 30 years old and he's never changed a tire on his car. He wouldn't even know what to do. And to me, on one hand, I'm sad for him, because it's like, I learned how to drive a stick shift when I was 15 years old. And I learned how to pull a tire off a car right after I bought a car. I didn't even need to change the tire. I had to jack it up, pull the tire off, and then put it back on just so that I could practice and go through. So just in case, and no one told me to do that. I did it on my own because I wanted to make sure I knew how to change a tire, and I wanted to learn how to do it in the safety of my own driveway and not wait until it was the last minute and I was like, stuck somewhere and I don't know if I have everything I need to change a tire. So that's a little bit of my background as far as getting into the trades, as far as learning about systems, learning about high precision, learning about holding a high standard. And that what was instilled to me by a lot of those old timers really carries through in a lot of aspects of your life. It really does. Having a standard with your wife is important. Having a standard with your children is important. Having a standard, at your workplace. And I get it. The world does not seem to reward craftsmanship like it used to. The world wants to hurry up and get everything done as fast as possible, even if that means sacrificing quality. And I disagree with that. I think that it takes what it takes, and if it takes 5 extra minutes to get it done right, then it's worth the 5 extra minutes to get it done right. But who's going to enforce that? Their boss is not going to enforce that. It's on you to enforce that. It's on you to hold that standard of conviction for yourself. If you're doing a job out there and you know that you can do a better job than you're doing, but you're only cutting corners because you're competing with 92 other people that are cutting corners, then you are sacrificing your own personal standard for somebody else's profit. Okay? And that's something that you're going to have to, cope with. You're going to have to realize that it could be, something that you might want to change. I understand about being competitive, and there is what I call a level of proficiency that is good enough. I like to use the analogy of washing dishes. The very first time you wash a set of dishes, and we're talking hand washing with the sink and the soap, and you're taking the plate and you're dipping it in the soapy water, and you're scrubbing the plate really good, and you're making sure it's clean, and then you're dipping it in the bleach water for a rinse, and then you're setting it over. The first load of dishes that you do, let's say they may take you 15 or 20 minutes to do that load of dishes, to start to finish, and then let's say it takes you another 5 minutes to dry them. So we'll say that very first time it took you 25 minutes. Well, the next time that you do dishes, let's say it's the same amount each time, okay? So the next time you're going to get a little faster, right? You're going to get a little bit faster, and your quality is going to stay the same. And after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times of washing those dishes, the same amount each time, you're probably going to cut that time in half. So where it used to take you 25 minutes, now you can get that done in about 12, 13 minutes. Okay. Now, should you just keep trying to get faster and faster? No. At the point where quality starts to suffer for speed, that's at the point that I am at the fastest that I can go with this. And some things are going to take what they take. So when we started at 25 minutes to do these dishes, and we have practiced and we have perfected our process, and we've got ourselves down to 12 and a half minutes, okay? And then Susie over here shows up and she bangs out them dishes in 10 minutes, but you notice that they're not 100%. She beat you on time, but she sacrificed some quality with that, okay? It's not our job to point out, but Susie missed some things. Let her work speak for itself. Let your work speak for itself. Okay? If anyone ever comes at you and says, well, we need you to speed this up. Little Susie over here is getting these dishes done, and it takes her only about 10 minutes, and it takes you about 12 minutes. At that point, you have a right to defend yourself. And that is when you bring it up and say, yeah, well, I didn't want to bring it up, but Susie misses things. And sometimes those are not 100% clean. And since we work in a food establishment, I think it's pretty important that all this dishware that I'm cleaning is 100% right. So are you asking me to sacrifice some quality? You throw that back on that manager. You say, are you asking me to sacrifice some quality just so that I could be faster? And they're going to tell you, well, no, we agree. We need the quality to stay where it is. Because they're never going to advise you to sacrifice quality. Okay? And that there puts him back on his heels and makes him rethink, okay, maybe I need to have a talk with Susie over here that's banging these things out in 10 minutes, but she's missing stuff. Okay, and in that aspect, that's not you running to the boss and tattletelling and trying to throw someone under the bus. That is you defending your position and defending your standard. Okay, now I know that is a very vague description, but I hope that analogy can help you when there's so many other things that can be adapted to. And we're obviously living in a world where time is very important. Time is valuable. Nobody wants to waste time on doing something a second time. I hear it all the time in the trades, on job sites about like, oh man, I don't want to waste my time doing this. And I always think to myself, you're not wasting your time. Your time is being paid for. You're here. Your company is paying you to do a job. Most companies would gladly pay you to get the job done right the first time, because the repercussions of them having to send somebody back out because you left a loose end over here and you left a loose end over there. You may have been faster that day, but you're going to cost the company a lot more resources in the future. Fuel charges, more additional labor to have someone else come in behind you and clean up your messes. So I would always argue that it's better to be a little bit slower and walk off a job with a sense of pride. Walk off a job knowing that you took that extra 5 minutes and you got it done the right way, and close that chapter. That job is over. Walk off, never look back. That's the sense of pride that I hope that you guys can all start to learn to have. If you don't, then we need to get back to that. And then, you know, well, that's a little bit about, you know, my past, my history. I worked on elevators in Chicago. I worked on high speed, very fast, high rise elevators, 60, 70 floor buildings. Unbelievably fast elevators. I've ridden the car tops at full speed. We weren't supposed to, but, you know, what are they going to do to me now? We did it. I've worked in other major markets. I've worked in Las Vegas. I've worked in Phoenix, Arizona. I've worked in Kansas City, Missouri. I've worked in Springfield. I've worked all over the state of Missouri. I worked all over the state of Kansas doing service and repair work. I worked all over the state of Arizona doing service and repair work. So over the years, from 1999 to 2025, I mean, 2026, it's 25 years, guys. I've seen a lot. I've seen all the technology change years over years. A couple years goes by, boom, they got a new controller out. Oh man, we thought we had it all figured out. You never have it all figured out. You're always going to be a student. The learning thing, you're going to learn forever. Nobody is an expert. I meet an elevator guy that says that he's an expert, and basically what I know is that he's full of shit. That's what I know, because the best elevator men that I've ever met in my life that were 30, 40 years building elevators, those guys are the first guys to tell you that, oh man, I'm just doing the best I can. I learn something new every day. And that's the attitude to have, because you do. You learn something new every day. Okay, and it doesn't matter what job you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're pouring concrete. It doesn't matter if you're felling trees. It doesn't matter what your job is. You get up every morning and you go with a sense of urgency. You go with a sense of pride in your heart to do the best you can. And you help out your brother next to you, your sister next to you. You help them out. You be that guy that when you don't show up that day because you're sick or something, everybody on the job misses you. That's who you want to be. You don't want to be the fastest guy on the job. You don't want to be the guy that bullies everybody because you're, deflecting, because you're worried about attention being brought to yourself. So instead, you like to point out other people's flaws. I mean, we know that. Some of us are in psychology. We've read a lot of books. A lot of people out here can identify that part about you. And a lot of people out here that identified it, we don't say nothing. I don't know how many times I've walked onto a job site and saw some big meathead, huffing and puffing and let me tell you how big and badass I am and all this stuff. And the first thing in my mind is, wow, you're like an 8-year-old inside this giant man's body, and it's sad. And I feel compassion for him, and all I want to do is give him a hug and tell him, hey man, it's okay. You don't gotta lie to kick it. You know what I mean? We're all learning. We're just trying to have a good day. You know what I mean? I want everyone to be safe. I want to go and put in a hard 8 hours worth of work for my 8 hours worth of pay, and then I want to go home safely to my family. I don't want to go home missing fingers because I was cutting corners and working for the man so fast that I decided, hey, why don't I just go ahead and, skip some of these safety protocols and electrocute myself? You know what I mean? Safety matters. Adherence to a standard matters. And it could be the simplest thing, like making your bed every morning before you leave to go to work. Nobody ever sees it, right? Nobody ever sees that made bed, right? You get up, you leave, your bed is in shambles, but you know what you did? You started your day with a win, something that you did just for you. You woke up, you got ready, you made the bed just for you so that when you got home, you can see that bed is made. And it's made for who? It's made for you. You made it for yourself. Okay, so you start every single day out with one small victory. You can do that in numerous ways. If you're trying to lose weight, if you're, doing a new diet, anything that you're working on, consistency matters, but baby steps. You're not going to conquer the world. Okay, I weigh 205 pounds right now. Okay, I struggle with my weight only as far as I would like to cut down to about 185, about 20 pounds I'd like to lose. and then I'd like to bulk back up to about 200. Okay, and then I'd like to cut back again to about 190, and I'd like to bulk back to about 200. And it's going to take a year. It's going to take a year and a half. I'm realistic with my goals, but I'm going to work at it every day. And in some times of the year, I will be cutting. I will be eating less. I'll be calorie restricting, and I will be having to suffer while I'm cutting weight. And then other times of the year, I'm going to be working out heavier. I'm going to be drinking more protein, and I'm going to be, going into beast mode. And it'll ebb and it'll flow, and it's not going to be easy. But I have realistic goals. I know how much muscle a grown man like me can put on in a year. It takes about a year to put about 10 pounds of muscle on. And it's going to take about 6 months to cut some of that, because along with that muscle, you're going to also put on fat. It's unavoidable. So you're going to ping pong ball your ass back and forth, and you're going to have to do this 2 or 3 times. But I can see the vision. I can see in a year and a half from now being 200 pounds again, same weight as I am right now, but instead I've lost 15 pounds worth of fat and I've replaced it with 15 pounds worth of muscle. And it's going to be completely transformative on my figure. I'm already, okay size. I'm already decent, but that, but I have a realistic expectation. I'm not going to hit the gym and expect that I'm going to be where I want to be in 6 months from now. Because what'll happen is when you set that unrealistic expectation and then you don't hit that goal, then you get bummed out, and then you get depressed, and then you get a little bit, disincentivized with yourself, and that just kills your motivation. And so it's very important with any task that you start out, whether you start a business, whatever it is, that you have realistic expectations. And, that goes along with being honest with yourself. A lot of people lie to themselves because they lie to other people. You lie to other people all day long. Oh, you look great, when really they don't look great. I don't do that. If you look like shit, I'm going to tell you. I might be polite and rather just say nothing versus saying anything mean. But I'm not going to tell you you look great if I don't think that you look great. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. That's not the kind of guy I am. I'm filming this, and I'm probably going to cut it into pieces, into segments, and I may or may not release the entire thing, but this will be a 2 or 3 part series. The full thing will be a 2 or 3 part series as we get into these topics. There are some stories that I want to share with you guys about childhood, about growing up, about hardship and loss, about I lost my first dog because a neighbor guy poisoned it. I've had tragedy happen when I was in high school. I was just out of high school, and I had a really good friend of mine die in a car wreck. Well, it wasn't even a wreck. The car caught on fire, and he was passed out, drunk, in the passenger seat. And the guy that was driving panicked and fled the scene. And my buddy died from smoke inhalation. And I always go back and think about those things, had he been with me, what would have happened? Had the guy that was driving maybe had just had a little bit of courage and would have maybe tried to pull him out of that car, he might not have died. You know what I mean? So I'm going to be sharing a lot of these stories as we get into some of these other more in-depth topics, whether we're talking about the human condition, psychology, whether we're talking about patterns and systems, and how the greater economy is working. When we get into these things, there are going to be stories that I'm going to pull back from my childhood and from growing up, and experiences that I've had in my life that I can share as an analogous that go along with why these topics are important. And I hope to on one hand, I'm going to be laying an awful lot of myself out here. I'm going to be sharing an awful lot about my experiences. I'm going to be sharing a lot about myself, and I struggled with whether or not I wanted to do that, because in my nature, I'm a very private person. I don't really want anyone to know where I live. I don't really want anyone to know, anything about me. And normally for most of my life, I just did my work, I did my business, and I didn't really share my opinion with anyone. And I realized that I think that I had a very unique set of experiences growing up. I had a very unique experiences in the elevator trade, and all the books and everything that I've read, and the various other jobs that I've had over the years. I mean, I'm not defined by just being an elevator mechanic, guys. I was laid off at different times throughout my career. And when you're laid off and you have bills and you have bills to pay, you got to find something. So, I worked as a tower dog in the cell phone industry. I built towers. I did 4G LTE upgrades in Phoenix and surrounding areas. I traveled for that work. I learned a lot about that business. I did that business for about a year and a half before elevators kind of came back. I've done window washing. I'm like an expert at window washing, with the squeegees, and I've done commercial work with window washing. I had my own pressure washing business, built it from the ground up. I've done house washing. I've done concrete driveway pressure washing. I've learned all of the aspects about that business and what different products to use to get different stains out. Let's see. Going back to my very first job was at McDonald's. Okay. I worked at McDonald's, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I worked at McDonald's. I worked the night shift, and of all places, I worked at a McDonald's that was 1 block away from my high school that I went to. So, of course, that was, a little bit embarrassing on a Friday night when the basketball game gets out and I'm in the McDonald's working while all my buddies and stuff are, leaving the game, and they're coming through the drive-thru and all of that. But hey, I was making money and they weren't. I've worked at car dealerships. I was a car porter for like a whole summer. I drove all kinds of cars, every kind of car you can think of. I've driven. I've washed and waxed every kind of vehicle that you can think of. I am somewhat of an expert at car detailing, not so much at buffing and using compound and stuff like that. But I can definitely I know quite a bit about detailing vehicles and things like that. I got a job as a carpenter for about a year and a half. I worked as a carpenter. I always was into carpentry, and I mean we used carpentry skills in the elevator trade. A lot of times we had to build our own platforms. A lot of times we had to use lumber for one reason or another. And so I learned how to use all the saws and everything, but I found myself laid off and I needed a job, and I contacted a guy and he gave me a job, and I started at the bottom. I went and set door jambs and did base and case, and I did that for months, and I got run all over the place, just a little grunt. Here I am, a grown-ass man. Here I am, many years into the elevator trade. I'm an elevator mechanic. Making $80,000-$90,000 a year, and I find myself laid off and I need work, and I get humbled and I go take an $18 an hour job to set frames and do base and case. So sometimes that happens in life, and sometimes you got to ain't too proud to do the job and start at the beginning. I'm proud to say that I worked with some really great guys, and they taught me an amazing amount of stuff. Todd, if you're watching, I really appreciate everything you taught me. Taught me unbelievable amount of craftsmanship when building staircases and doing beam work. I did a lot of high-end houses and beam work. We did full pantry builds, full custom kitchen builds. staircases that would blow your mind, and like hickory and oak, and some of the most beautiful stuff you've ever seen, guys. And Todd taught me a lot, so I'm very grateful for Todd. But yeah, I had to put my ego in my pocket, and I had to go to work because I needed to make money. And so I decided, okay, well, they're not going to just hire me. They don't know who the hell I am. I'm going to have to start at the bottom. So I just, I put my ego in my pocket, and I started at the bottom. And within a year, I was putting in stairways. So, and doing curved, wrapped banister railings, grab rails. Yeah, I learned an awful lot doing that. Anyway, this was just one segment, a little bit about who's the man behind Schultz Report. What am I about? Why would you, want to listen to what I have to say? I wrote a book titled Pathway to Unified Consciousness. It'll be, it's being uploaded tonight, and it will be available in stores, in Amazon and places like that within probably about a week. Here subsequently in future videos, I will do actual promo announcements for the book launch, and at that point is when I'll start getting into the details of what the book is actually about and some of the topics, and really just explain it from an author's point of view, why I wrote the book, what the book hopes to accomplish, and all of that. I'm not really good at self-promotion because I try to stay humble, and I don't really like tooting my own horn, so to say. But I just wanted to make this, and I'm probably going to use something to cut all these down into smaller clips. So if you're finding one of these small clips that's a minute or 2 minutes long here and there, you want to go to Schultz Report. I am available at Schultz Report on X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. I'm all over the place. Okay, I've got all my accounts locked in. As soon as this book is uploaded in the next day or two, I'm going to be working really hard on schultzreport.com. Schultzreport.com, I have a plan laid out for it. It's going to be a really cool website, and it's going to be a lot of value for you. And I hope that you guys will use this site in your daily, just daily, and use it as a functional tool to go about your day. After the site is built and dialed in the way I want it, then I'm probably going to work on developing an app for your phone so that you can just have the Schultz Report app and you can open it. The things that I'm about and the things that we're going to cover on this show is, we're not just going to say on the surface level that, well, did you see the pattern there? Did you see that? We're going to get all the way down into why, how. We're going to explain it in a college level detailed manner. And then we're going to do it in a way, I'm going to do it in a way that I can break things down, I can share previous stories, and I can hopefully tie it in a real human way that you'll be able to understand, and you'll be able to maybe adopt it into your own personal lives. And we can we're all a work in progress, okay? I don't claim to have all the answers to everything. I am a student forever. It's just a lot of things I have nailed down. I figured out, and I have a lot of knowledge to share, and I'm finally, getting over my fear of being on camera, my fear of speaking about these things, and I hope that you guys can tell I'm sincere, because this is not scripted. This is just straight from the heart, and I think, that's the best way to be, just unapologetic, and that's about it, guys. That's about it for today. I have no idea how long this is. I hope you enjoyed my story, and I hope you got to learn a little bit more about me and who I am and what I'm about. If you end up seeing one of the small clips of this, probably YouTube is where the long format will be. It'll be Schultz.report on YouTube, and I'll probably upload the long version of this on YouTube, and then I'll use all the short clips and I'll scatter them to the wind, and they'll be on TikTok and X and Instagram and all of the other little places. So if you're finding one of these short videos, check it out on YouTube for the long version. All right, have a nice day.